Okay, it's 7:30. I call this meeting to order, and we will begin. We're just going to go directly into a workshop, and this workshop is aimed at having the council discuss certain items pertaining to zoning. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process. We've been working on zoning for close to a year now, and have some interesting changes, things that I feel like we've gotten a lot of input from people, some of you today who are in the audience, and we hope to come up with the best zoning ordinance that fits our community, but also protects your property rights, as many of you have said. So what we want to do now is begin by having Eric go over some of the changes that we've previously discussed and what we plan to present to the Planning Commission next week.
Eric, yes. You'll explain the process and consultant and all that stuff so people know where it came from.
So this process started, can you all hear me? Okay. It started last spring. We had a visioning session with the City Council, and one of the priorities of the City Council was to make sure that they can control growth, protect the residential areas of the city, and go through a whole process of reviewing the current zoning code. We then hired a consultant that came in, and we had a workshop meeting with her back in August, and the council gave direction to the staff and the consultant on some of the items they wanted to look at as far as the changes. A document was prepared and presented to the council on back in December. And then in early January, we had a workshop meeting to review that document. And then based on the comments and the input from the City Council, that document was updated, and the latest draft was presented to the Planning Commission for their consideration next week, and also to the City Council last night. So the latest draft that we're working off of is the one that was presented yesterday. It's on the website for anyone that wants to view it. The purpose of tonight's meeting was to clarify a couple issues that were still hanging over from the prior workshop meeting, and just to make sure that all the items that were of concern are clarified and get some finalization so we can move forward in the process. So that's why we called the meeting this evening. One of the items that was still out there was currently the zoning code in each of the zoning categories or the districts outlines the height limitation and also the number of stories. It was recommended that the number of stories be eliminated and that the height control what's allowed in each district. And this is something that is it's recommended by the American Planning Association to use the height rather than the stories. So that's one of the items that could be used to clarify, because there's always a discussion that goes on to what is going to be allowed in each one of those stories. So for an example, the existing code has 2.5 stories. There's always an argument on what goes in that half a story. Is residential allowed in there? Is that an attic? Is that for mechanical? So by using the height limit as the controlling factor, you get away from those issues. So that's one of the first items to put out there for discussion of the council.
And as we discussed today, talked to a couple of people. We feel like this is the best approach to take. I think most of us do, in clarifying and making it clear. In June 2021, we changed the code for building heights in the Central Business District, and when we did that, the code originally said 4 stories or 60 feet. So when we changed that in June of 2021, it was recommended then that we remove the number of stories. So that's the only current code that doesn't have stories with it. It just has height. So that's kind of what we're recommending for the rest of the zones, including all zones, RA, manufactured zones, all of R1, R2, R3, C1, C2, and CBD. Does anyone have a problem or an issue with that, or any questions?
No, I'll make a comment I made before, and that is that using the analogy of a historical building under federal guidelines, you make sure that the exterior of the building remains the same, and then what you do in the inside, assuming that it's not, you know, Confederate building, or, excuse me, a Civil War building or something where the inside is protected, then you can do what you want to do on the inside, and we will be very, very deliberate about our architectural approvals so that the outside of the building at 35 feet meets the Blue Ridge City plan.
And you're talking about just CBD, correct, Doc?
Well, I'm basically talking about our responsibility to have reproducible, recognized and understandable rules which we have in landscaping and so forth. So yes, that's what we're talking about the CBD, but that really it's a concept that applies to everything.
So let me just say, because this is completely off of what we've discussed in prior meetings, what we would be doing, we discussed that we wanted to control growth, and I think every one of us has campaigned on that, and everyone knows my stand on it. Controlled growth is, the only way to do it is density, not allowing as many units. So, for instance, going from 3-story to 2-story condos or whatever. So we talked about in the last workshop going from 3-story to 2-story or 2.5, and that's really what got this going, is we've got to define a half. A half is for an attic space, which we did discuss that. So then the just going away from the stories was discussed today, because the actual CBD was changed a year and a half ago from 60 feet to 35 feet with no stories. So it was introduced that, well, maybe we should go to no stories on everything. Well, the only problem that I do have with that is that doesn't reduce density. I mean, it does it because pretty much if we stay the same height at 30 feet, then you could technically get 3 stories in. So just for the council, that's the difference. So if the council, do you want 2 stories or do you want no stories? And we'll leave the height, and the height, we didn't change the height to start with. It was the only 2 things that we did discuss changing, everything else was 2.5, was R3 going from 45 feet to 30 feet like the other, and to 2 stories instead of 3. And then CBD going from allowing 3 stories to be built to 2. So we could leave CBD,
2.5.
or was it 2.5 or?
2.5.
Okay, 2.5. So really, it's just a matter of, do you want 2 stories, eliminate the half story, or do you want no stories at all, and just let it be the height? The other thing that we talked about was just leaving CBD, the 35 height, no stories, and then changing C2 to just commercial. No residential in C2.
Let's let Eric go over that whole thing right there too, so they'll kind of know what was discussed. And that way you guys will have a good understanding of everything.
Yeah, so the other
Yeah.
things under consideration in C2, which currently allows residential uses, we would eliminate residential uses in C2, and that's to protect the integrity of the residential areas. In the central business district, I'm going to pass out the current code section to you. Just pass those down. And if you go to 11.3, the second asterisk, the current language allows another 6 feet to the existing 35 feet in CBD for mechanical on top of the building. That's one item. And the other item is all existing buildings as of June 15th, 2021, if destroyed by fire or natural disaster, can be replaced at the current height. when the zoning code was prepared by the consultant, that section was left out, and I know that's a concern. One of the other things we may want to look at is eliminating the 6 feet on top of the building for mechanical and leave the 35 as the height limit, which would also include the mechanical, rather than allow another 5 feet for 5 feet for a total of 41 feet. So that's another item for consideration.
Can you go over all the height for each district, if you will, please? So everyone's really clear on.
So what's being proposed in RA, which is residential agricultural, it's 30 feet. That's the height limitation. And
Well, and now, those were all from previous, those weren't changed, right?
correct.
Yeah. So we didn't propose to change anything outside of what was
Right.
years ago, is the R, was except R3
Yeah,
and,
the ones I'm going through tonight is what's in the document that's being proposed. So this is your changes that you made at the
Right.
January 5th meeting.
Can you still give the height for each
Yeah.
district? Yep.
So then R1, it's 30. In R2, it's 30. Currently in R3, it's 30. And then in C2, it's 35. And CBD, it's 35. Let me just look up.
Didn't we say, I think we said today 35 for R3. Did we not? We did. 'Cause
Well,
we were
well,
voting
I'm
on-
just going by
Okay.
what's in the current document. It's 30 in the current document.
Okay.
And then M1 is 35. That's what's in the current document.
so the current is RA, right, current, and we didn't change. RA, R1, R2, and C1 is all 30. And we did not change that, so it's all been 30 feet with 2.5 story.
Right. R3 was 45 at 3 stories.
And then C2 has always been
That was 35.
35 and 2.5 stories.
And CBD is 35,
Yeah,
with no stories.
yeah. So, and then M1 was 45 too.
Yeah, and
Also-
and that went down to 35.
And that's what we were discussing today with R3, just because we understand in our community that workforce and affordable housing is so important. So we want to make sure that people are able to build housing for our locals. This doesn't involve anything with housing authority. This is just simple, affordable housing, workforce housing. So, you're going from 45 feet to 30, well, it was proposed 2 stories, but after we discussed this today and looking at numbers, you've got to kind of keep the integrity of that and keep it at, our suggestion, 35 feet. But that's still, 10 feet lower than it is, it would be.
And how much property do you own in R3 and C2?
I own the majority of my property in R2. And in R2, I will tell you on that, and this is one thing R2 is removing everything. So our plan in the future was to possibly build duplexes, townhomes, all that. But R2 has been suggested by the council to remove all townhomes. It would just simply be single-family homes. So, and that's part of it. That's part of our moving, the process. We do own an R3 property, but it's already occupied, already has existing. What was your point with that?
No, I just wanted to know.
How many do you have, Jack?
In what? One?
Any? How many do you
I
have
have
in
one property.
in residential?
Mhm.
Okay.
Angie, how many you
Yeah.
have?
I've got a few.
So this is gonna hurt you as well.
Yep.
It's gonna limit what you can do on your property as well.
Yep. I've got them in all zones. But I'm gonna stick to what I told people I do.
We told people we would
growth, and
control
the
growth.
only way you can do it
So
is density.
We have a big city and it's diversified. And we've got to do what's best for everybody. Because we all made that vow.
So,
when we
so
ran.
what is your suggestion to reduce
Just
density?
give me just a moment, please.
I will, go ahead.
So we made the promise to people when we ran that we would control growth. Nobody here, I don't believe, in this building wants another 7-story motel, do we?
Does
I mean,
everyone,
if you do, that's, I understand, but I don't think
does
anybody
everyone in
does.
this building understand, though, that that was changed into June of 2021? There will never be, unless another council changes it, that was corrected by, I actually spearheaded that effort. So we were 60 feet, it was reduced to 35, so you're not
We're-
going to
we're not-
have,
We're
you're
not
not going to
talking
have
about
that.
what was in the past, Mayor.
You're talking
We're
about,
talking about today and what we've got a group
Mm-hmm.
of people here and we've got people that want this and people that don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
They're critiquing everything that we do. I told the people that I would do what I did for them. You asked me a question, how many properties do I have? I have one. I have no vested interest in any of this.
okay.
I have no vested interest. It's not gonna help or hurt my property, however I do this. So when I vote for whatever I vote for, it's gonna be based on what I believe is best for everybody sitting out
And
there.
that's how it should be.
And that's how it will be,
Yeah,
as far
it
as
should
I'm
be. It
concerned.
should be.
And I believe
Exactly.
the others are the same, feel the same way, do we not?
Oh,
So we didn't come here to do
Exactly.
anything but help everybody in this room and in this city. Am I correct? Is there anybody at this city council that sits on this council that has any other objective?
Well, we represent the people that put us here.
That's exactly right.
And thank God you are all saying that, because I would not want any, I would expect nothing less from any of you, because that's what we are here
So-
to do. We're here to represent these people. We're here to represent all the people in this community, everyone.
Well, let me say
And look out
this.
for everyone's best interest, including those who need affordable housing, including all the people here in the Central Business District.
I don't
You
believe
don't
any of
need
us
further
here.
restrictions. And the one reason we came here tonight was because several on the council wanted to reduce everything across the board to 2 stories. And that's just not logical.
Why is it not logical, though? That's the only way to control growth.
Well, I guess I'm confused on controlling growth.
Well,
Are we
growth
wanting
would be,
to-
If you got a 2 by 2 mile square, city, do you want 2 and 3 story condos everywhere or apartments? Do you want to just fill this small town with just, you know, just whatever Canton is, Woodstock, I mean, what you see up and down there? Or do you want to stay small town? I believe we all campaigned on small town, quaint Blue Ridge. Is 3-story apartments and condos and affordable housing now, is it small town? That's the decision that this council's got to make. I know what I think about it, but, you know, I mean,
And I understand that. I mean, here's what I've been getting. And I've gotten a lot of calls from several of you in the audience over the last few days, last few weeks. Here's how people feel about, you're an American. We value 3 things: God and family, most of us, our ability to bear arms, and our property rights. Those are 3 things, 4, counting family and God, that people, they demand of us. And you may say you're protecting these people, but these people have rights. They have property rights. And you can't just go around restricting everything because you don't have that vision. Because it's their right to have the property that they purchased. When they purchased that property, they had certain rights. And it's not appropriate for us, because we have positions on the city council, to take away those rights. It's just not. And you all can vote how you choose to vote, but I'm for the people. I'm voting for the people for their rights.
but did
Or
they
I'm
not,
not voting, but I'm going to express my opinion.
did they not have that same right when you voted to go from 60 feet to 35?
And that's why I said to someone today, I could never do that again. I could never be an advocate to reduce that again. Because we received an email today from one of the members in the audience, his aunt. They have a property, it was the old Andy's Jewelry property. And she made it very clear in her email. She said, you know, we weren't happy when it was reduced. But as a council, we listened to the people, and we knew 60 feet was too much for this community. And that was a choice we made because we knew it was too much. You reduce it to 35, and then within a year and a half, you want to reduce it down to 2 stories. That is not fair to any of these folks who own properties.
I think think
just
the
fine.
idea of height handles what we are trying to accomplish. Second, I go back to my historical designation. If the 35 feet in a historical building, you gotta keep it like it's supposed to look on the, yeah, sorry, can't hear me?
Yeah, just speak into the microphone if you will, Dr.
What I
Whaley.
was saying was, I think that 35 feet meets the criteria of keeping things under control, and that what's inside that 35 feet is the property owner's right, whether he, like my house got 15-foot ceilings in it. I mean, don't want anybody telling me how high my ceilings can be, but it's easy for me to agree with how high my building can be, because it's what it says. And I don't own anymore.
So-
But on the same principle, Doc, my wife runs a business out of her residence. She came down and got a business license. Eric will allow her, by provision, to put a 2x2 sign up. So I'm gonna go back on that same logic that the mayor has here, that we're taking people's rights away. So can I go put a 20-foot sign on my building?
No.
So we have to have control in some aspects. We're here to govern this city. We're not here to dictate people's lives, but we're here to govern this city. So if you want to talk about the laws that we're creating and the ordinances that we're doing the same ordinances that allow me not to have but a 2-foot sign on my house.
Well, technically, it's a residential area, and you should not be allowed to have a sign there in the first place.
My point exactly.
So, yeah.
My point exactly. I don't have a sign on my property because I'm not allowed to have a sign on my property. But when I bought my property, I knew that I couldn't have a sign on there. I know I can't have a short-term rental on my property, but when I bought my property, I understood that.
And when they bought their properties, they understood what they could do, but we want to go change the game for them. Let's change it, and,
I'm not
I'm sorry
talking
you
about
can't do this, but now,
stopping people from doing what they want to do. I'm talking about we can't pick and choose
well,
which ordinances we're going to do.
and then-
I was actually asked a question I'd like to refer to Chuck. A member of this audience asked me exactly how are we going to enforce this. Chuck, would you answer that, please?
Yeah, there are 3 or 4, maybe even 5 ways to enforce a zoning ordinance. One is at the permitting stage. If you have an undeveloped piece of property or even a developed piece of property that you need a permit to either build something on or renovate something, the first thing staff is going to look at is whether it's consistent with the zoning ordinance. And so that's the first place you enforce it, is at the permitting stage. If you have an existing building and you put it to a use that's not allowed in the zoning ordinance, then that's a violation of the city code. And the police officers and the building officials can go and issue a citation, just like they can issue a citation for running a stop sign. A third way to enforce the zoning ordinance is to go into court and get an injunction if someone is either using their property in a way that's not allowed under the ordinance, or they're building something that's not allowed under the ordinance. We can go into court and have a court enjoin them from doing so. So those are the primary ways that you would enforce a zoning ordinance.
yeah, and we've been doing that for years. That's what we do. That's what we've been doing for years, and it works effectively in most cases, as long as the rules are being followed. And thank God we have Eric now, who does that for us and has been, he follows the rules.
Well, I do want to say on property rights, I have a lot of property, so I'm not for, but I'm for people being able to do what they want. But when you live in a place that's zoning, it's the law. The elected body can change it at any time, whatever they think. We've got some rules we got state law to go by, but it is not illegal to change zoning. So
No, it's
not
certainly,
illegal
no.
to change zoning.
No,
So-
we've changed zoning before. This zoning code has been changed since 1978 when it went into place, I believe 11 times. And, some little minor changes, nothing major, but it has been changed. This is the first overhaul of the entire ordinance that we've done since 1978. So when it first came into existence, so it's certainly not illegal, but I think you have to also take consideration into the fact that we do represent the people, and we need to hear from the people. So anything you hear here tonight, although this is a workshop for us, You will have the ability to speak or, email the council with your opinions, and then next week at the zoning hearing before the planning commission, it is a public hearing that is open for the public to hear and to speak how they feel about the zoning changes, which we would encourage everyone to do that. But I guess what we need to do tonight is just figure out, moving forward to the planning commission, how we get there and what we present to them. So, Eric, I'm gonna let you get back to.
So we went through the stories versus the height. We talked about C2, eliminating residential uses. And then in CBD, we talked about eliminating the 6 foot for mechanical, leave it at 35. And then in R2 would be a conditional use for duplexes and townhomes. The way it was prepared by the planning consultant, she only allowed single-family homes in the R2 district, which is the same as the R1. So this would provide, they would need further approval by the city council to come forward if they wanted to do duplexes or townhomes, and they would be only limited to 2 attached.
I missed that one.
So in the R2 district, the way the planning consultant came forth and recommended was to have single family only. Prior to that, you could have up to 4 townhomes attached on an R2 site. So we went from one extreme to the other. And to find that happy medium, we've come back with, we can allow duplexes and townhomes on R2 property, limited to attached, but it would be a conditional use where they'd have to come forward and get approval for the city council.
And is that 2 townhouses or 2 duplexes, or what is that?
Two duplexes or 2 townhouses.
Okay,
Yeah,
would that be?
that would be R2. And then the other item was in R3. The original height there was 45 feet. We had discussed at the last meeting 30 feet, and now as a compromise was looked at as 35 feet. I mean, those are really the issues that are outstanding from the January 5th meeting.
Does that sound reasonable to everyone up here? Bill?
Angie's got something she wants to say.
Well,
didn't see
I
it.
was just gonna say that, I was in this discussion on this, but again, it's completely different than what we talked about, so the rest of the council here, because it takes 3 to make a decision, the rest of the council's gotta be on, do you want the stories or no stories?
I think we should go to 2 stories, all the way through except CBD, and do 3 in CBD and 35. Somebody's gotta speak up and do something.
Well,
I disagree with that.
Say again?
You think it's better than using the fees, is that everything's uniform?
well,
I think everything should be uniform, that way we don't have any,
well, the fee's
we're
not,
not picking and choosing on anything. We just, that's the way I feel like it should be.
the
2
fee,
stories, 30 feet,
the feet's not changing though.
No.
The feet would not be changing. What we've got to decide, do we want 2 stories or no stories?
No stories is what is recommended by the Northwest Regional Commission. It's been recommended by our advisor because it adds 2 levels of complexity. So you need to simply go by the height because that makes it clear cut as to everyone to follow the same rules. And there is no discussion on what is a half story. Yeah, you'll get that. I've had that question a million times the last week. So, we've been advised by everyone who's an expert in this to go like we are currently with CBD, just by height. It's the logical thing to do.
Let me ask, I know that Eric briefly said this, I just wanna make sure I'm right. I know that you had said the International Brotherhood of Planners or whatever it was.
American Planning Association.
Okay, right, somebody recommended height, period. We got height in the present rule, period. And the recommendation of our consultant is height, period. I favor height, period, that allows the people that own the property to decide how they want their inside of their house. So I would agree with the
Well,
the planning commission, the consultant that we had, and the general consensus of communities. I don't know of any community that tells you got so many feet and then restricts the stories that are in it. I haven't seen that, and I've putzed around on the internet, but I've not made an exhaustive study of it. I don't believe that that exists anywhere else. And if it doesn't exist anywhere else, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel.
So you've got two opinions, yours and mine, Doc.
well, if you don't do that, then, I mean, that really, instead of reducing growth, is gonna increase it, because then you're gonna have 3 stories, you know, wherever they can, I mean, if it's 35 feet, if it's 30 feet, so it does not necessarily control growth. It's the simplest thing, but it does not necessarily control growth.
Well, maybe you consider this, if you know, because current property owners have vested rights, in my opinion. But maybe you look at anybody who's looking at annexing into the future, or you look at anybody who's looking at changing the rezoning and do it that way. But I don't think you can really necessarily take away people's property rights for your vision, but they would know it going into the future. You've got a piece of property that someone wants to annex into the city, they would understand the rules going into it. Or they want to change their zoning. You know, they want to go from C2 to CBD. So, and I do want to make one comment. When I ran for office, my biggest thing for control growth was feathered zoning, because it is very logical for me, you know, you have densities. You would have your highest density in the central part of town, and then you transition to C2, then to C1, and then you go from there into residential areas. And then again from there, I feel like, you know, the way our town's set up, you've got a lot of R1 around the central business that are on the outskirts, and then from there you transition R2 and, you know, R3s. You've got some R3s where apartments would be perfect, you know, on the outskirts of town. That's where most people on this council seem to want them. But when I talk about controlled growth, that's what I talk about, protecting those areas. And I think we all may have a different vision of how we want to control growth too.
Well, I mean, if our height is 30 feet in all residential, including C1, and 35 in the commercial, then, and no limits, then that does mean that all zones can probably get 3 stories. All zones, C1, C2, it's already in CBD, so it is not controlling growth.
Chuck, is there anything unlawful in what I've recommended?
Which one? On the story limitation?
Yes, sir.
There-
What I've recommended with the 2 stories and 30 feet everywhere except CBD, being 3 stories and 35.
There's nothing unlawful about it.
No,
Does it break
definitely
any
nothing
state law, or-
unlawful.
Are we violating any ordinance or code by doing that?
By limiting the number of stories?
Yes, sir.
None that I'm aware of.
Only if you you would be breaking the law if you didn't change the ordinance. You would have to change the ordinance, or otherwise you're be violating someone's property rights if you tried to.
Understood.
Yeah. So by
I just want to make
changing
sure
it-
what I'm proposing is lawful, Chuck.
I'm not aware of anything that would prohibit the council from imposing a maximum story limitation
Or a maximum height limitation.
or a maximum height limitation.
Is that
Now,
well within our purview? We have the right to do that?
It is. I mean, you know, so there's nothing that prohibits that. You know, the test is always going to be, you know, at what point does a regulation prevent, you know, the reasonable use of property or the reasonable economic return on property. That's sort of the test. But that's pretty ambiguous, and it's across the board. But there's nothing that prevents the council from establishing a maximum story or a maximum height limit by zone.
Then I stand with my recommendation.
Bill? Christie?
question that in the area in which you would say there can be a duplex with two sides or two townhomes, I can't recall any townhomes I've seen that don't have a third story. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, we were talking about the R2,
I
adding that
understand.
as
I'm
a
just asking
conditional use.
Just about the townhomes and the duplexes, because most duplexes are 2 stories, and most townhomes are 3. I'm just seeing what I'm not a builder and I'm not a real estate guy, but it seems to me that most of the duplexes I see are anywhere 2 stories. Most of the townhouses, I got a bunch of people my age that live in townhomes, and they all have 3 stories. And they used to live in big old houses with big old lions. Now they're in townhouses, and they all have 3 stories. So I don't know how we're gonna allow townhouses.
Well, it's a
If we're not gonna
it's
allow
a
3
conditional use.
I understand,
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question, because I don't know much about that sort of thing.
It would be a
But one
conditional.
of the things that we talked about at the workshop was that, let's just say Overlook for an example. Overlook was a subdivision and they went by whatever our code said at that time. But that's not really what we want. We don't want that. We don't necessarily want that, or I
Who
don't
is
think.
we?
Well, the people,
Well,
and
how do you, I'm real serious about how you can say what the people want.
Because
I'm real
the-
comfortable saying what I can say what people have said to me.
I can say
But
that too.
I understand that, but that ain't 1,500 voters. I'm just trying to say, using the collective "we" is not the way that you make a discussion about facts. My opinion is this, and I have had some people that I have spoken with, but when you say "we," you're speaking, and you're using the collective "we," I think you're speaking for people that you can't speak for.
True.
You need to say, Angie believes this, and I have talked to some people. But using the collective "we," and I'm saying the same thing to Jack, using the collective "we" is not right. And I don't believe that anybody at this table was anointed to come in and do what, I was anointed to do this. I think we were elected to use our best judgment, and that we have to decide what the best judgment is. But I'm not about to comment on a collective "we." I don't believe that that's my role. My role is to exercise my own best judgment and experience and take what I can get as input. But I will never try to speak for you and use the collective "we," unless you talk to me on telephone, and I can say specifically, I've talked to Joe, but I'm not going to say the collective "we." And I think when we do that, we're telling the people stuff that's not totally true.
Okay, well, then I'm gonna clarify then I can tell you that everyone that I talked to in campaigning, not one person said that they were for another Overlook.
Well,
Not one person, and I can tell you, before I was even on council, at a zoning meeting, when somebody wanted to do another development on the 9 acres or so, right up here that adjoined the Overlook, there was probably 50 people that lived in this city, citizens, that did not want that. So I feel like I can say I know what the constituents, what they want. Not 100%.
We're getting off
not
topic.
100%, but so
We,
when I say
these
that,
folks, are-
so what I have presented is what I think that the people wants, and actually me as a citizen myself would like to see. And I think we
the
all
thing
have
is
the right
we
to
were all
judge
elected to
it.
govern,
Yeah.
Angie. We were all elected to government, so we are the voice of the people. And the people will let their voice be known. In the next election, actually, the people will let their voices be known. But as long as we're setting where we are, they elected us to govern and do what we believe is correct for this city. Would you agree with that, Doc? So when we say "we," we're talking about the people because we govern. That's what they elected us to do, Doc.
Well, and that's where we give the people the opportunity to speak at a public meeting, which all of you have that right. And that's why we're going to allow them, and we hope that everyone from the council will be at the planning commission meeting next Thursday. It's going to be at 5:30 here, so that your voice can definitely be heard, because you are who we represent.
And they've shown
we-
that they
we-
have
well-
they've shown they have an opinion. Because every meeting we've had pretty much since we started this thing in January, we've had probably 4 to 6 people in the audience. We've probably got, what, 30 in here today? 25, 30? So they're here to do just that. They're here to show us what they want. They
And that-
are.
And that's not counting emails that we've received
What
and
I'm
phone
saying is
calls.
though, is we're here to govern the people. The people are here. They're going to a zoning meeting and they're gonna tell the zoning commission or the planning, whatever. They're gonna tell them what they want. I guarantee you that's gonna happen. There's no way to stop it. And that's their right and that's what they should do. But it's our decision moving forward, what's best for the city. And like I said, they'll decide whether we were right or wrong in the next election.
But what responsibility do we have? Do we have responsibility to the people that the citizens that may or may not have elected us? Or do we have a responsibility to everyone? Who do we have a responsibility to?
We have a
What,
responsibility. to the
who
people.
do we have to act on their behalf?
Well, I think we have a responsibility to everyone, because a lot of the people in here are property owners who do not live in the city, who do not have voting rights, but they live in this city. Vicky there, she lives outside the city, but she owns property in the city. She has rights. She just can't voice them through voting, but she can certainly voice them in here. So yeah, I mean, we represent everyone, and I think when we signed up for these jobs, we're doing what's best for the community, not what's best for just a certain group of people, for the community.
And the people that live here is the majority of the community, and that's what I'm saying. I know what I heard. I campaigned on it. I'm not changed from 12 years ago when I preached it to when it previously on council. My tune hasn't changed.
Then we stand on it, we move forward, Angie.
Well, I mean, I cannot say though that I can't compromise.
Well, all of us, we've
I mean, I
compromised through
can't.
this
I mean,
entire
I mean,
process.
Which is
But
what we
I'm
tried
one
to do
person.
today when we met, and that's why we came up with the recommendations that Eric has just presented to you, which we would feel like kind of benefit everyone. And that's what we're trying to accomplish, is compromise, because that's what it's about. It's about us working together, not against each other. We're all in this together. We're all a community.
That's what we're doing, aren't we? Working together to try to resolve this and get it
I would
where
like
we
to
need
hear
to be.
the other two
And
council members.
when we did run, I will say, when I went and knocked on a bazillion doors, I feel like people are concerned about losing our small town charm, the quality of life, our infrastructure, and everything else, to where it does worry me that, like allowing so much stuff to come in will dilute that, I guess, and take away from what we all did run on.
Well, I think most of us ran on keeping this community quaint. But my opinion is there's nothing in this ordinance as of today that would not make it quaint. When we removed the 60-foot building guidelines, that changed that. And everywhere I've gone, people, that's been the major point of contention, was that 60-foot building, and that was changed. And I don't think it's my opinion, continuing to take away people's rights is going to change that. And we also, all of us ran on the fact that we were dealing with a lot of issues with affordable housing, with workforce housing. That was one thing that last council was definitely, we focused on that. And again, I'm not talking about housing authority. I'm talking about affordable housing for people in this community. I've given the example, my daughter moved back here, Davey's daughter moved back from Tallahassee. They had to live with her parent, or with her husband's parents, for a while because they couldn't find a place to rent. They ended up finding a place to rent. It's about 800 square feet. It's in Copper Hill, and it's $1,600 a month. So she didn't have the opportunity. She would love to have found an apartment or something here to rent, but she couldn't. And those are the type of people. We want to look out for everyone so they have an opportunity, so that people who work downtown don't have to drive to Canton. And we all ran on that. We all ran on also not only protecting our residents, but also trying to help them find viable ways to have housing.
Can I ask Christie a question? Because I think all of us agree with what she said. Christie, what I'm asking is, does your comment, which I totally agree with, have anything to do with 35 feet or 2 stories? That seems to be Angie's bone, and I'm just trying to get what your comment is favoring, the 35 feet or.
I
I mean, what
definitely-
are you commenting about stories, or are you commenting about the fact that this does what you expect it to do in terms of height, and that you support it? That's all I'm asking.
And let me just say, the guidelines he just presented to you, are those agreeable to you? They were agreeable with me, with Angie, with Eric today.
We agreed with those in our last
Yeah.
meeting. I'm just asking, are
Jack
you
hasn't.
commenting specifically about stories, or is your comment to say, I agree with what we have done in this proposal?
It's hard.
Because I didn't understand what
Like, I went and drove around today and yesterday and was like looking at all the land and the property that we have like available for building and not. And it definitely worries me if I like look around and, you know, I start seeing like all these 3-story buildings coming in. That does make me nervous. Like, there's 2 lots behind me. Like, that would make me want to move out of the city. I don't, you know, I feel like our quaintness of our hometown,
Are you asking then to reduce the height of the 2 lots behind you to 25 feet? I mean, what I'm trying to get to is, if you got 2 lots behind you.
well, I'm not just
What-
saying just me, I'm just
Oh,
saying like looking.
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
Somebody has the right then, under this proposal, to build a 35-foot building, correct?
30.
30
Okay,
foot.
30-foot
In
building,
residential.
whatever it is, 30 feet.
Yeah.
Does that make any difference to you about whether they put 3 stories in there, and, you know, the top one's a gym, or whether they put 2 stories in there, if they confirm to the 30 feet and build a beautiful house there? Does that make any difference to you, is my question? Because what you're saying
Is
is
if
not directed to, I either like this
Yeah.
or I don't like it.
Is if a 3-story building in my backyard versus a 2, which one would I rather have, like as a
A
citizen?
building that's within the height restriction,
Oh.
it's a beautiful building built by, you know, one of our great builders, and guy's got $1 million in it. Is that gonna offend you if that building is gorgeous and the guy's put 3 stories in it versus 2 stories?
And it would be a
It's still gonna be 30
house.
feet high, it's gonna be
Yeah.
beautiful.
'Cause
My
it's-
question is, are you speaking to the stories, and are you speaking, because I agree with everything you've said.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't understand, I'm trying to get to whether, yes, I agree with this, or no, I don't, and you haven't answered the question. You could just, again, I'm not trying to put you
Yeah.
on the spot, but that's my question. I don't understand
I
your
definitely-
comment in terms of,
Yeah.
yes, I like this idea, or no, I don't.
I definitely think like the growth needs to be controlled.
I agree with you. Let's talk about
So-
that building behind you that's beautiful and cost $1 million and is well-built. You've got to say, I support this or I don't, and I don't want that beautiful building, this, you know, Architectural Digest gonna take pictures of it, but I don't want it back there with 3 stories in it. You can only build it back here with 2 stories. That's the question that we're asking here. So you can tell me I've driven around, I see too many pieces of property, that I've got 2 lots behind me. You still haven't spoken to yes or no. It would offend me if this beautiful building is gonna be an Architectural Digest had a 3rd story in it. Because that's the question you've gotta answer.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna restrict them, and not gonna put an ugly building in there. That's part of the rest of our thing. It's gonna conform to what our building code is. Now, the only part about that building code is what's inside the skin.
Basically, would you rather have a house, a single-family dwelling behind your house, or a 3-story apartment, or condos, or townhouses?
No, it's not.
That's not the
That's
question.
not the same?
No.
Next
Well,
question.
it don't matter how big, it's 3 levels or 2 levels. It don't matter how beautiful it is, it can be beautiful. You're just saying that, you know, well, then I'm completely lost to then.
I think what he's trying to say,
You would never have a building.
to use the example that Christie was saying, you live in a single family, let's say you're R1 zoning
Yes.
probably.
Yeah.
So the worst case scenario is you're gonna get a home that's 30 feet, because that's what the limitation is in that district.
From where, Eric?
30 feet from where?
From where?
From
My
the-
house, use my house. Where does my 30 feet start?
So
From my
in
house?
this new proposal, it
Hold
would
on,
start.
hold on.
no,
Well, that's a
no.
whole, we'll get to
Yeah,
that.
we'll
That,
get
that's a
into
whole
that.
nother,
We've been talking
where
about
you,
it.
That's another big thing.
Yes.
That's a
Where
huge
are we
thing.
starting this from?
correct.
Yeah.
It would be ground level.
But the
Well, what's
issue
ground level?
is what's inside that 30
Not ground
feet?
level, but the lowest part of the-
Is it 2 stories, 2.5 stories, or 3 stories? That's what you have to decide.
Say that again?
What's inside that 30 feet? Most cities use height as a determining factor. And you don't get involved with what's inside as far as stories.
And
Because in a single family, you're not really controlling population. The family can either live on the first 2 stories, or they can add a 3rd story and have bedrooms up there. It's
Yeah.
the same family.
yeah, my husband and I live in a 3-story. We never go upstairs. We never go to the basement. We're always on the main level. So, but there are 2 of us, so that's it. You know, you're not increasing population. You're not. You're just.
Well, that would be, and so I get it too. So now we're talking about only in R1 and R2, single-family homes. Does it really matter if it's 1, 4, 2, 4? We're saying 30 feet. So really, what does it matter? Is it 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, 4? They can't go more than 30 feet. I agree on that.
Yeah.
But it's the multifamily, it's
So-
the
so-
multifamily, the 3-story on that, and then if we allow it in C2 up to 35 feet, and we allow it to a CBD, I mean, that's a lot of 3-story buildings that are possible, 3-story dwellings. So,
The biggest amount of property we have right now that is undeveloped is actually R2, and if we take, the plan is to take out townhomes, dwellings, it would be all single family. So that's what would happen with R2. So I don't think and that's the largest amount of undeveloped property. CBD, oh my gosh, we hardly have anything left in CBD. We have maybe 5 lots that aren't even built on yet. So I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. C1 and C2 are about the same. You have very few lots even available. So I don't think those things, I think you're going to have to look more at people annexing into the city or trying to change the rezoning. So, but residential, you know, you're 30 feet and single-family homes. The only one that we're proposing have multifamily is what is current, which is R3, and there are still very few properties like that. And it's up to the council to rezone them if people ask for rezoning. You have control over that. You know, quite a few of the R3 properties right now have houses. Like I know the Housing Authority has a ton of R3 properties and the nursing home and all that, but it's already populated with homes. Our R3 property is populated with homes. So a lot of the R3 properties are already, they're already built on. So, you know, I don't think that's a huge issue. R2, if you eliminate townhomes, all that, which we're doing, if I come back to you and we have R2 property, if I come back, I say, Davey and I decide we want to build townhomes, we're gonna have to come to this council and get permission. We get a conditional use. Otherwise, we build single-family homes. And I'm fine with that. If that's what this council wants, I'll come back to you if we decide to do it, and we'll ask for it. Otherwise, we'll do what we need to do. So, you know, you're looking at a very small population of properties that we're even discussing at this point. So keep that in mind. You know, we were talking today about the properties up there at Long 515, and they're not even in the city limits, like where Kylie Brown's shop is, or Folger Gas. None of those are even in the city. So you don't have to even think about those. You know, you're not going to see big hotels sitting up there because you could, they're county properties, and there's no zoning in the county, but they're county properties. So, property you had mentioned down below, CVS going towards Serenity, that's all county property. Everything on the right-hand side of the road, past Orvin Lentz Connector, all county. You'd mentioned that one time, but you don't have to worry about that. That's a county thing.
Yeah.
It's not city.
All right, Madam Mayor, you know I'm all about closure, so
Yes.
my question is, how do we end this meeting and accomplish what we came here to do? Do we approve this, that has been presented so that it gets printed and can be here next week for that meeting? Which
I
is
would
what
think
I would
so.
what I would, this is not a voting meeting, right?
No, it's not a
This is
voting
not a
meeting.
meeting, so I will say for myself, I am in favor of that the
Okay.
way it is, so that the printer will have something to print
Okay,
there.
Okay,
We're not voting though, this is just discussion, right?
yes, just discussion.
okay, so I wanna say what I think maybe to be a compromise, but I could still get outnumbered on this, is exactly what we talked about. I'm not for just no stories at all in.
Explain now what we talked about, so we.
Well,
are
okay,
clear.
okay.
Do you want Eric to go over the recommendations again?
Angie said what
all right,
we
so-
talked about,
so-
we've talked about so much,
That's
you're
fine,
gonna
I
have
said
to
do you-
refresh my memory.
As he says, if we're gonna allow 30 feet in single-family homes, why does it really matter if they got 1-story, 2-story, or 3-story? If we're allowing 30 feet. Okay, so I don't have a problem with single, for R1, R2, R3, I don't have a problem with saying no limits, just height. But we're gonna, I think C2 and C1 and M1 only it to be commercial, no living above it. If the council wants to say, okay, well, I want living spaces above C2, C1, then we're gonna have to say 2 stories. Because I don't wanna see 3 stories, that would be allowing 3 stories and pretty much all commercial. And we could have condos and townhouses all over this town. And then also in residential and houses. So I can't go above and beyond what I said I would, I said I'd help control growth. And so, I think if we reduce down in C2 and C1 to only commercial, they can still do their C1 30 feet high, 2 stories, just like down here at the Methodist Church, it's got 2 stories and it's commercial. CBD stays as it is, 35 feet.
And
No stories, that it's, it's up to 35 feet, no stories. R1, RA, R1, R2, up to 30 feet, no stories. R3 is the sticking point here. We could say 30 feet, but Mayor Haight wants to go to 35.
I would prefer to stay at 45, but I'm willing to compromise at 35. I feel like that's fair. I mean, if,
The thing on R3, there is very few properties that's R3.
What are they?
Well, it's the current housing authorities.
yeah, but it's already built out.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, and the Cocker property is, well, no, I'm sorry, you guys are CBD. Never mind, yeah. That's true, it's not, we keep referring. Yeah, it's not yours.
And then the Haight property on Jones Street.
But we've got a trailer park in there, so.
Eric, is there any more? Up on East Second Street, a lot, if you're going from, Church Street to the end of the road that way, all along the left side, it's just small parcels is R3, but there's not any big, huge tracts. Not to say that something couldn't be rezoned, but then again, that has to come before the council. So currently, right now, if we let R3 stay at, or reduced it from 45 to 35, and no restrictions on stories, just like R1 and R2, there's not a lot of properties. It's a matter of whether or not
Thank
you're
you,
comfortable
Angie.
with that.
Thank you. And then we've heard from Jack.
A matter of what, I didn't hear.
It's just a matter of if you're comfortable with the 3 stories on R3 right now.
Basically,
I'm-
she's agreeing with height everywhere without stories.
Yeah, because you gotta consider.
I understand what she's doing, I'm just fathoming what we're talking about.
I mean, here is the thing, the R3, you can only build 10 units per acre. So, I mean, They can either do it in 2-story, 3-story. I personally don't wanna see a bunch of 3 stories, cause I do think that does take away the quaintness, cause we're no different than Brookhaven or, you know, a lot of places that have, you know, multiple stories.
So we're talking
I
R
would
three,
prefer
no
to see
stories,
single-family homes all over the
No
county
stories
and
on
the
any
city,
of
but,
it.
you know, I mean,
Any of it.
you know, that's
stories
not
in any of
realistic.
it.
We have to have some,
Just height.
so,
Which is what it's been recommended to do, just height. Yeah.
So
you know.
you're good with just height?
She is.
That's what she said.
What she said.
Yeah, but I wanna hear her say it.
She just said it.
This is a big old decision. I wanna know what I'm voting on
She
here.
just
We're
said
not
it.
voting, no, whoa, whoa,
Well, I
whoa.
understand, but we're going to, so I wanna know what I'm talking
And
about.
we will vote on this after it goes to the planning commission when we get to hear from everyone in the community too.
Yeah,
Just keep
I
that in mind as
understand
well,
that.
cause it could still, you know,
So,
change.
again, my
I would
question,
be-
you're good with just
I would
heights?
be okay with it in our single-family home areas.
Yeah.
And even,
And
and CBT.
in other words, you're good with
But
what
I
he's
want,
presented.
I'm not okay with 3 stories in C2 and C1.
Yeah, no,
I'm
none of
not
it, and
okay
that's
with it.
not, I don't think that's,
Huh?
we're not allowing the residential, just if they do commercial,
Is that allowed?
yeah. Cause we were gonna take that out of the C1 and C2, remember?
So you got.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
I mean, to go with no stories on the residential is one thing.
As long as we take
Cause
residential
it's single
out of
family,
C2.
but to
Okay.
go with no stories in C2 and C1, no, cause that could be then 3 stories at the 35 height.
For
You
resi-
got that, Eric?
So, yeah,
Now, that's a commercial building, it's not a residential building you're talking about.
exactly.
But our ordinance right now says C2, it's 35 height, 35
Yeah.
limit. If we take away the stories on that, then they could build up to 3 stories. Commercial on the bottom, 2 stories on the top.
Not on what's being proposed.
Yeah, but not on was, and that was only changed about 8 or 9 years ago. That was only allowed in C2 about 8 or 9 years ago, so. But we'll just change it back to what it was about 8 or 9 years ago, which would be no residential.
Now, again, this is a compromise. I mean, this is a compromise. I'm not saying it's, you know, there has to be a majority here, so, you know,
And
I'm
this is,
respecting, I understand y'all voted on controlling growth too, so I'm not gonna say that I'm just going against that. I'm not. I'm just saying that I would be okay with this, but y'all have to be okay.
and let me remind everyone, all you're voting on tonight is sending it on to the planning, you're not voting, all we're discussing is sending it on to the planning commission, and there could be changes. I've been on this council, this is my 14th year, 13th, 14th, and, we have many times we'll see things go to the planning commission and they come back and when we hear from the people, we sometimes do, you know, so you're open to change on that. This is not in concrete. This is what we're sending to the planning commission. And they're gonna give us recommendations too when they hear from everyone. So, you know, we feel like this is a good compromise and we hope do you, Bill? Okay, so there, you know, we have 3. Do you, Christy? Feel like what he's presented tonight is a good compromise? Okay.
I'm gonna try to summarize.
So, well, we're not taking, we will have to vote to, take comments from the
Well,
public and I
before
don't,
we do that,
Yeah.
I just wanna summarize to make sure.
Okay.
We,
Thank you, Eric.
so, what's being proposed that you need to decide on is all the zoning districts, there'll be no stories. It's all gonna be predicated on what the height is. And just to go through it all, so we're on the same page, RA is 30 feet, that's what the height would be, that's not changing. R1 is 30, that's not changing, R2 is 30. R3 is currently 45 feet. It's been recommended to reduce that to 35 feet.
Why would we not reduce that to 30 to make it uniform all the way
because
through?
it's high density residential. You've got low is R1, R2 is medium density, R3 logically progresses to high density, which would give you a little bit more space, you know, with footage. So you're progressing from a low density to a high density, which allows for more, just like in CBD.
That's her pebble
Yeah.
and the ripples that she's talked about for a year and a half.
So then we get into C1 and C2, we're eliminating residential uses in both of those commercial districts, and they would be 35 feet. And then we're back at CBD, we're not changing that, that's 35 feet. And then M1 has been reduced from 45 feet to 35 feet. no stories.
And there's no residential in that one either.
Correct. I think there's single family in there only, in M1.
And then one,
Let me go check.
And then in the CBD, taking out the 6 foot, so 35 and
35.
that's everything.
Where's that chart? This thing's still in pages.
yep, I think that's,
Yeah, it's 100 and something pages. Hold
That's
on,
it, no, that's it. There you go, the yellow marks, that's it. What page is it? That's the second set of pages.
Okay, so it's not,
engineer is next.
so it's not allowed in M1.
And the thing here is that on, part of the reason when I don't think that I think it's okay, or, in the R1 and R2, single-family homes, is if we're gonna allow up to 30 feet, again, why does it really matter if they have a 3rd floor with a bedroom on it? Really?
No, it
For
doesn't,
single-family homes.
it doesn't.
I guess the biggest thing right here is how does everybody feel about the R3 with the multifamily?
You've heard my opinion, I say stay at 45, but if we have to compromise and go to 35, that's how it is, so. And that's still going to hurt that, because when you're building, trusses, I'm not a builder, but it just seems like you'd need more space in between the floors, and,
Well, but 3 times 12.
How would this impact the real loose proposals we have for worker housing?
it would destroy them. You would not, it would destroy them. They would not work at all, so. If you-
Three-story
If, I think, no, if you change that down, yeah, if you change that down to 30 feet, that's not, 35 is going to be a push, and that's why even the builders out there are all shaking their heads. 35 is a real push for that. I would suggest really 40, if you have to, 40 feet, whatever, just to allow room, because like they're saying, you've got to have between floors. Wait, no, you can't speak, I'm sorry. Davy? Yeah, topography. Things of that, yeah, I'm sorry,
Let
we're
me
not
ask
taking
this
comments,
question.
so.
Under these proposals,
Yeah.
someone could come with a proposal to the city council for a special use permit to go higher than this, correct, or not correct?
Yes.
I believe that was put in the language.
They
Yeah,
could,
okay, I'm
but,
just saying that, so
yeah.
therefore, if we're for worker housing and a beautiful worker housing project that's gonna be an architectural digest is proposed, the city council can choose to give them 40 feet if they need to give them 40 feet, or whatever, correct?
you can, but unfortunately, a lot of things become political, so it makes it a little more difficult, and it's better, honestly, to have them in your guidelines as you go forward, so.
All right.
It's my opinion, so.
I don't believe anybody here is against affordable housing at all. Are you? Are you,
Am
Angie?
I against it?
Yep.
No, but I don't wanna see a bunch of
mayor
three-story
just-
buildings all over town either.
Talked about somebody coming in here, your daughter, I believe, and paying $1,600? That's not affordable housing to me.
Oh, it's not,
No.
but that's what she's got.
And if we need workforce and affordable housing, I don't think any of us are gonna vote against anything that has to do with affordable housing. We just want it done correctly and make sure it's affordable housing. And the right fit for the community.
Well,
So, I mean, I just wanna clear the air about affordable housing. I'm not against affordable housing. I don't think anybody on this council is, or anybody sitting here is. We just want it done right.
And even at that, let
And
me.
we want it to really be affordable housing, excuse me.
Okay, and
We
then
really
I'll
want it to
speak.
be affordable housing.
So, and when we look at that, Jack, I've gotten, if you go around to some different communities on Mineral Springs, there's housing there. It's 4 stories, I believe, 3 or 4. And that one is, it's based on income, but it's not Section 8 housing. So then you also have another it's another 4-story apartment, and I believe it's 4-story. I did not drive by it today. But it is behind Tractor Supply, and it too is income-based. So that allows people, because what happens is the investors come in, they do get money from the government if they work with people in the community, and you have to meet a certain income requirement. And if you don't meet that income requirement, you don't get in. I know a couple who lives here in Blue Ridge, their parents have tried to get in for several years, and they are both on Social Security, but they're $30 over, and they can't get in. So, because of their Social Security. So, those are the type of things that we need to be promoting, but an investor is not gonna come in and buy property, spend $1 million on a piece of property, when they can only build up so high and only get so much return on their investment. So,
The Mineral Springs you were talking about, do you have any idea what the average rent there is?
I don't, but,
You're talking about the proposal we had from about the.
No, she
affordable
mentioned
units.
housing over here.
No,
in
and
Mineral
these are all
Springs.
in
I'm
the
just curious,
county.
what are we talking
Yeah.
about as affordable housing?
those are all income based. So I think, like for the ones that I was talking about with my friends here in Blue Ridge who are residents in the city, their parents, I think, were they needed to be somewhere in that 1,100 range. They would have paid about $1,100 for a 2-bedroom, but that's actually, unfortunately, Jack, affordable housing at this point.
That's insane.
It's insane. It is. If you look at what's for rent out there, your people are paying $2,000, $3,000 a month for housing, and it's not realistic. So, and unfortunately, we look at the short-term rentals and things and that, but people are selling $1 million, $2 million homes. They're not going to rent those to full-time residents, and if they do, they're going to charge about $5,000 a month. So when I look at that, I'm saying we need to keep this ball rolling. I actually have talked with Jamie Hensley, Commissioner Hensley, Chairman Hensley, and we're planning a joint meeting between the governments in this community, and I know that Travers had a part of that. He had kind of suggested it, Ginger Rogers, and we reached out to Chairman Hensley, and we all want to come together and find some good solutions to bring these type of investors into this community to bring workforce housing. And I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and we're planning hopefully to do that sometime in March after the zoning is over. But those are the type of things we've got to think about, because investors aren't going to come in if they can't build up. Building up is the cheapest way. Building out is not the cheapest way.
Well, the flip side of that, though, is why would any developer want to build affordable housing when they could, at $1,000 a month, when they could get $1,600 to $1,800 a month?
Well, a lot of them rely on those grants from the government, where just like the ones I was talking about, where people have to qualify with a certain income, and then the government actually, because they help them with certain tax incentives, loans, different things like that. And that's why those things work. That's why we have 2 of those in our community now, but they're located in the county. They're utilizing city water and sewer, but they're in the county. But that's how you get them.
Well, I do agree with that, but when we say in R3 that you can be 3 stories, we're not just it's not just restricted to affordable housing. That means 3
No.
stories for any developer to come in and build whatever kind of 3-story they want to.
But yeah, that's exactly right. It's not restricted to that because people have rights. They don't have to build just affordable housing, but
True.
but
And-
those
and-
are the
and-
things
and-
we
and-
want to
and-
encourage.
Well, that's not controlling growth, though. So,
But you're
again,
giv-
I
but-
said-
but
I said
you're-
what I'd be,
But a lot of times when you're
We're not having a meeting about affordable housing.
That particular growth, though, I feel like is more to help the community, to bring people in the community housing, not bringing people in from all over. Most people who are coming here buying, Angie, I'm in real estate. I sell $1 million, $2 million houses. They're not coming up here to live in an apartment. I can guarantee you that.
Well, they may a condo or a townhouse, though.
But the areas right now where we have those availabilities, no one's going to. Davey and I would never build $1 million condos on our R3 because nobody's going to buy them. Look, you've got the Qantas Fairgrounds across the street. You've got another. It's not conducive to building $1 million homes. Going on top of a mountain or buying a lake lot, that's where you're going to sell those type of homes. But if we built condos downtown, they're not going to sell, and we're going to be stuck with them. I mean, that's just logic.
Let's move forward.
Okay, do we have anything else?
Yeah, we're
Yep.
not doing
So
affordable housing tonight. Let's
Is
move
everyone,
forward.
that's fine. Is everyone pretty much on board? So Eric, what we're going to propose to you then, let's bring this meeting to an end and let's just present that on. And then this is again not in stone. You guys, I want all the council to try to come to the zoning hearing next week. All of you to come to the zoning hearing. And then you will have the ability to speak then, okay? So we're in agreement. I think so.
I think we do have one other thing here.
Okay, we have one other thing.
Yes, if a property is destroyed in a fire,
Mm-hmm.
can it be built back to what it was allowed to start with, or does it have to go by our code?
Nope, that's what we said, if a
Well,
property.
Let me just clarify.
Yeah.
So the current language, it's only in the central business district, allows someone that had an existing building as of June of 2021, if it's destroyed by fire or a natural disaster, it can be replaced at the current height. That's the current language that's in CBD only.
So basically, if a house burns down in CBD, the house gets built back,
At whatever the height.
whatever the height, but it's a house,
Even though we've.
right? Is it a
No,
house or a
no,
building? We can build it any
It's
way
a
they want to,
building.
as long as they follow the height.
Yeah.
That's good.
So if any
Yeah.
of these buildings that's over the height that we're at 35 feet, so there's a couple that's over that, if they were destroyed, they could only be built back to what the code says, and I think there's a couple that's a little over it, so they,
To what the code said at the time? At that time, so,
Yeah.
so there's,
Okay.
so like right now, if we've got if there's a 65-foot building down there, that's a little
well,
bit
it's over code anyway, yeah.
Yes, it can only go back to what the
60 foot, okay. That seems fair, so everybody would get to build their buildings back to code as it was at the time, and I think that's fair to everybody. Yeah, that's very fair. Do you all agree? Okay, good. So we can present those things as that. Okay, I'm going to ask that we, unless you have anything else to say?
Well, I think there was some question
Oh.
of that they wanted to ask the city attorney about the process, the next
Oh,
steps.
yep.
So Chuck,
Chuck, take the floor.
Yeah, so we'll take what we understand to be the consensus tonight, and make a few additional changes to what's being proposed. And then that will be presented to the planning commission next Thursday for public hearing and for the planning commission to make a recommendation, to the council. The first reading will be at the regular meeting of the mayor and council on Tuesday, the 21st. And I believe we're having a special call meeting for the second reading on Tuesday, the 28th. So planning commission next Thursday, 16th, first reading before the council on the 21st, second reading on the 28th.
Okay, I want to ask you, get something, I think I know this answer because I've asked you in the last workshop. Since there will be a public hearing at the zoning meeting, and everybody's invited, or the planning commission, yeah. Do we have to have another public hearing at the council meeting?
No, state law simply requires there to be one public hearing
That's what I thought.
as part of the process, and that can be done in front of the planning commission.
Okay, so if anybody wants to go and express their concerns, they'll need to do that at the planning commission.
And that's why I would encourage all council members to be there, so that you can hear what's being said, so that you vote wisely on what's being presented next Thursday. So definitely mark your calendars to be there, please. Okay? Yeah. Okay?
You'll be able to read it on
Okay. Well, I believe that is all. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.